Chapter 3 Manchester Insurrection. Blusterovsky, Collicourt, and other editorial prophets of the Continental Democratic Movement have, in their leading articles, shown themselves disposed to vilipend the late Manchester insurrection, as evincing in the rioters an extreme backwardness to battle, nay, as betokening in the English people itself perhaps a want of the proper animal courage indispensable in these ages. 1,000,000 hungry operative men started up in utmost paroxysm of desperate protest against their lot and asked Collicourt and Company how many shots were fired. Very few in comparison. Certain hundreds of drilled soldiers sufficed to suppress this 1,000,000-headed hydra and tread it down without the smallest appeasement or hope of such into its subterranean settlements again, there to reconsider itself. Compared with our revolts in Lyons, Warsaw, and elsewhere, to say nothing of incomparable Paris city, past or present, what a lamb-like insurrection. So, Carlyle, first of all, the Manchester insurrection is a real insurrection in 1842, uprising in Manchester by industrial laborers protesting low wages and poor conditions during the Chartist movement. So, Carlyle is saying that the Continental Democratic prophets, editorial prophets, so the newspapermen of the continental European democratic movements, have looked at this Manchester insurrection that happened in England and basically said, you know, these people are not serious. These the people that rose up, that were in the insurrection, had no committed no acts of violence, and therefore they were not serious. So Carlyle, as we'll see, is disagreeing with this. But to explain it a little bit more, the Blusterovsky and Collicourt, these are not real people. He is mocking, he's like, as he says, in Warsaw and Lyons, so these are like fake Polish names, and I'm not sure what Collicourt is meant to be. But he's saying these like newspapermen have looked at our insurrection, and they found both the marchers wanting, they have vilified them as backwardness to battle, so as cowards basically, and as the English people itself basically as lacking courage. 1,000,000 hungry operative men, so the people that were in the Manchester insurrection, there were 1,000,000 of them, and they started up in utmost paroxysm, which means a sudden attack or violent expression of a particular emotion or activity. So 1,000,000 hungry people suddenly started up, and they were desperately in their protest. And Collicourt and Company, these like fake names for the newspapermen of continental Europe, they basically said how many shots were fired, almost none. And a couple of hundred soldiers came and suppressed this 1,000,000-headed march easily, and without the smallest appeasement or hope of such. So without any way of having it reconstituted. And Carlyle is saying these newspapermen in continental Europe, they're just mocking us, saying in Lyons, in Warsaw, and I was so surprised to see that Paris, still in the 1800s, has a reputation for essentially chimping out. So the incomparable Paris. If these protests were in any of these cities, it would have been a lot more violent. So the insurrection was mocked by continental newspapermen as lamb-like, the one in Manchester. The present editor is not here with his readers to vindicate the character of insurrections, nor does it matter to us whether Blusterovsky and the rest may think the English a courageous people or not courageous. In passing, however, let us mention that, to our view, this was not an unsuccessful insurrection, that as insurrections go, we have not heard lately of any such that succeeded so well. So the present editor is Carlyle, and he's saying, you know, like, we're not really gonna argue with them. It doesn't matter whether these continental newspapermen think that what they think of the English. But Carlyle is saying, I don't think this was unsuccessful. And he's saying, as far as insurrections go, we've not heard lately of that succeeded. So he's kind of also counterpunching, and he's saying, okay, you had all these like violent protests in Lyons, Warsaw, and Paris. What did they amount to? Did the conditions of those people change? Was that a success? So he's definitely punching back against the continental commentators. 1 million hungry operative men, as Blusterovsky says, rose all up, came all out into the streets, and stood there. What other could they do? Their wrongs and griefs were bitter, insupportable. Their rage against the same was just. But who are they that cause these wrongs? Who that will honestly make effort to redress them? Our enemies are, we know not who or what. Our friends are, we know not where. How shall we attack anyone, shoot or be shot by anyone? Oh, if the accursed invisible nightmare that is crushing out the life of us and ours would take a shape, approach us like a Hercynian tiger, the behemoth of chaos, the arch-fiend himself, in any shape that we could see and fasten on. A man can have himself shot with cheerfulness, but it needs first that he see clearly for what. Show him the divine face of justice, then the diabolic monster, which is eclipsing that, he will fly at the throat of such monster, never so monstrous, and need no bidding to do it. Woolwich grapeshot will sweep clear all streets, blast into invisibility so many thousands men. But if your Woolwich grapeshot be eclipsing divine justice, and the God's radiance itself gleam recognizable athwart such grapeshot, then, yes, then is the time come for fighting and attacking. All artillery parks have become weak and are about to dissipate in the God's thunder. Their poor thunder slackens, ceases, finding that it is, in all senses of the term, a brute one. So Carlyle is sort of arguing against the idea that violence would have even made sense in this situation, because he's saying 1 million men came out, they aired their grievance in the street, and he's saying what more was there to do, because the structure or the culprit of their situation is not a particular person. It's like our enemies, we know not who or what. So it's almost like a structure that these men are railing against. There's no one specific person that is causing their grief. So to the extent that it's a structural grievance, there's no specific person, place, or entity to cause violence against that would help their grievance, that would help their cause. Carlyle says, I found this one little piece very telling. He says, how shall we attack anyone, shoot or be shot by anyone? So the part that I found interesting is that he says we. Carlyle, a man of letters, a man who writes books and opinions, he identifies with the workers of the Manchester Insurrection, which I found interesting. So he says, he continues saying, if this invisible nightmare, this like structural problem that the men are airing their grievance towards, are protesting against, if that would just take a shape, if it would take a particular shape, and it would approach us like a Hercynian tiger, behemoth of chaos, the archfiend himself. So if it would approach these men like a, I just want to say a little bit about these references. So the Hercynian tiger refers to fierce tigers of Hercynia, somewhere around the Caspian Sea in Iran. The behemoth of chaos is from the biblical monster behemoth in the book of Job. And the archfiend refers to Satan or the devil. So here are some interesting depictions of the tiger and the behemoth, as well as, of course, Satan. So he's saying, if like our structural problems, the structural problems that we are trying to have redressed, if they would approach us in the shape of a tiger, a monster, something like that, then he's saying a man or any of these millions of men can actually see the enemy and can go towards it, can have themselves shot. But they need to see what they're even fighting, he's saying. And Carlyle is saying, if these entities were taken shape, so if the justice were to take some kind of shape, and if there were some diabolic monster that is a corporeal monster that is eclipsing justice, then men will fly at the throat and need no bidding doing it. So they will not be afraid to do it. This is not a matter of fear, Carlyle is saying. The fact that the men had no violence is not because they were cowardly. It's because the thing they're fighting has no specific form. And Carlyle continues, the Woolwich grape shot, we had previously in the Sphinx seen the Woolwich artillery, so that's where the Royal Army artillery barracks are. So Woolwich grape shot is basically a very strong form of artillery ammunition. So he's saying you can have ammunition like this that would blast into invisibility many thousand men. So it would be a very strong thing. But if that thing was preventing justice, then if a thing like that, if a seeable, recognizable, thing like that was preventing justice, then it would make sense to fight and attack. And those, no matter how strong the artillery, it would stand no chance against God's thunder, he's saying. That the Manchester insurrection stood still on the streets with an indisposition to fire and bloodshed was wisdom for it even as an insurrection. Was wisdom for it even as an insurrection, Insurrection, never so necessary, is a most sad necessity. And governors who wait for that to instruct them are surely getting into the fatalist courses, proving themselves sons of Nox and Chaos, of blind cowardice, not of seeing valor. How can there be any remedy in insurrection? It is a mere announcement of the disease, visible now even to the sons of night. Insurrection usually gains little, usually wastes how much? One of the worst kinds of waste, to say nothing of the rest, is that of irritating and exasperating men against each other by violence done, which is always sure to be injustice done, for violence does even injustice unjustly. So Carlyle is saying, the fact that the Manchester insurrection stood still and was not disposed to bloodshed and to firing any shots, that was wisdom, Carlyle is arguing, because insurrection doesn't, as such, cannot really gain anything. It is a necessity, and it is a necessity to announce the disease. It is a symptom of a disease, Carlyle is saying, and the governors. So the working class is announcing a disease to the governing class, who, being not of seeing valor, who basically have blinded themselves. They are sons of Nox and Chaos and blind cowardice. So these governors, they're not really present. They're not managing the country well. And therefore, an insurrection shows the disease in the country, even to these sons of the night. But it gains little. An insurrection is not meant to gain something right at the result of it. It is meant to show something. And in order to be able to show this, it creates a lot of waste, unfortunately, one of which is the violence between the exasperated men. I love that the last part, for violence does even justice unjustly. So Carlyle seems to very much be against kind of a vigilante, kind of cathartic violence that can be experienced in a mob or in a crowd. Who shall compute the waste and loss, the obstruction of every sort that was produced in the Manchester region by Peterloo alone? Some 13 unarmed men and women cut down. The number of the slain and maimed is very countable, but the treasury of rage, burning, hidden or visible in all hearts ever since, more or less perverting the effort and aim of all hearts ever since, is of unknown extent. How ye came among us in your cruel armed blindness, ye unspeakable country yeomanry, sabres flourishing, hoofs prancing, and slashed us down at your brute pleasure, deaf, blind to all your claims and woes and wrongs, of quick sight and sense to your own claims only. There lie poor, sallow, work-worn weavers and complain no more now. Women themselves are slashed and sabred, howling terror fills the air, and ye ride prosperous yet victorious, ye unspeakable, give us sabres too, and then come on a little. Such are Peterloo's. In all hearts that witnessed Peterloo stands written, as in fire characters or smoke characters prompt to become fire again, a legible balance account of grim vengeance, very unjustly balanced, much exaggerated, as is the way with such accounts, but payable readily at sight in full with compound interest. Such things should be avoided as the very pestilence. So here, Carlyle, I'm actually not totally sure if this Peterloo massacre, there was a massacre in Peterloo where the yeomanry, so one of the British kind of equivalent of the armed forces of the day, killed 13 unarmed men and women. Not to mention, but Carlyle. So I'm not actually sure if it's related to this particular Manchester insurrection or if it happened before this. I think it might have been before this. But basically, Carlyle is saying when there's a violence in an insurrection, there's enormous waste and loss, which is the injustice between men to each other. So Carlyle is saying this is a very inefficient way of saying something, of making a disease visible to the governors. Unfortunately necessary at times, a most sad necessity. And he's giving, I think this must be then a different insurrection, but he's saying, look at the example of Peterloo. All these unarmed men and women, they were cut down. But more important, or these are countable. This is only the things that you can, the loss that you can account for. But underneath that, you've caused rage in all the hearts of the people ever since then, ever since all those who witnessed this massacre. They are now set against the country yeomanry. They, in all hearts that witnessed Peterloo, there's a fire burning or a smoke that could become a fire again of grim vengeance. So all these people that were witnesses to, part of, or damaged by the violence there, even if it's exaggerated, as it sometimes will be, or often will be, they will want to seek vengeance. And Carlyle wants to prevent this. He says, "For men's hearts ought not to be set against one another, but set with one another and against the evil thing only. Men's souls ought to be left to see clearly, not jaundiced, blinded, twisted all awry by revenge, mutual abhorrence, and the like. An insurrection that can announce the disease and then retire with no such balance account opened anywhere has attained the highest success possible for it." So this is quite the different perspective from the commentators in continental Europe that are proud that their protests in Lyons and Warsaw and Paris are so violent and chaotic. No, Carlyle says that it's actually the best scenario possible, that there is an insurrection, that it announces the disease, the grievances, the problems, and then no such balance account opened anywhere. And without causing any sort of externalities of vengeance, of the fire and smokes in people's hearts to be corrupted, just is able to retire, is able to dissolve. So Carlyle very much praises the Manchester insurrection. And this was what these poor Manchester operatives, with all the darkness that was in them and round them, did manage to perform. They put their huge, inarticulate question, "What do you mean to do with us?" in a manner audible to every reflective soul in this kingdom, exciting deep pity in all good men, deep anxiety in all men whatever, and no conflagration or outburst of madness came to cloud that feeling anywhere, but everywhere it operates unclouded. All England heard the question. It is the first practical form of our Sphinx riddle. England will answer it, or, on the whole, England will perish. One does not yet expect the latter result. So, Carlyle is saying that all these poor Manchester, the million Manchester March, that is what they, despite all the darkness and desperation that they were feeling, that is what they managed to perform. They managed to put the question to the governing class, what do you mean to do with us? Without causing any other externalities. They caused the whole country to reflect without, any cloud of madness and revenge being caused by that insurrection. So this whole paragraph is Carlyle continuing to praise the insurrection, and Carlyle saying, okay, now the question has been posed like the Sphinx riddle to us. What do you mean to do with all these people? And the governing class of England will need to answer it. For the rest, that the Manchester insurrection could yet discern no radiance of heaven on any side of its horizon, but feared that all lights of the O'Connor or other sorts hitherto kindled were but deceptive fish oil transparencies, or bog will-o'-wisp lights, and no day spring from on high. For this also we will honor the poor Manchester insurrection and augur well of it. I love the imagery here. So Carlyle is here acknowledging that the Manchester insurrection, did not come up with a solution, or no solution was offered to these people at the end of it. So they made their grievance known and then they dissipated. They are waiting for an answer. And he's saying that this is again a Scottish dig at the Irish, the way we've seen in the Sphinx chapter, because O'Connor is a typical Irish name. So he's saying, there was some response of it, I suppose, but those are deceptive fish oil transparency. So there's no real actual response to the grievances of the people. And he's comparing the kind of the response, the fake responses, to will-o'-wisp lights. And I looked this up, and you will love what this stands for. The will-o'-wisp lights, I will read in a second. Sorry, 1 second, my internet ran out. Okay. The will-o'-wisp lights are referring to, in folklore, a will-o'-wisp or ignis fatuus is an atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, or marshes. So this is a ghost light, a fake light that is seen by travelers at night. And he's saying the kind of whatever responses that were there at the time, that was not a real response of the governing class to address the grievances of the people. That was just like a fake thing, a ghost light. So he's saying for this, the poor people in the Manchester insurrection, there was no solution for them, and we must think of them well. We must have good feelings towards them because their grievances have not yet been met. A deep unspoken sense lies in these strong men, inconsiderable, almost stupid, as all they can articulate of it is. Amid all violent stupidity of speech, a right noble instinct of what is doable and what is not doable never forsakes them. The strong inarticulate men and workers, whom fact patronizes, of whom, in all difficulty and work whatsoever, there is good augury. This work too is to be done. Governors and governing classes that can articulate and utter in any measure what the law of fact and justice is, may calculate that there is a governed class who will listen. May calculate that here is a governed class who will listen. So Carlyle is saying that, probably there were some speeches and various other kind of words uttered during this insurrection, but really nobody is getting at the core of things. There's the men that are there, they're trying to articulate a feeling of injustice, but he's saying there's a work to be done by the governors and governing classes who should utter, who should verbalize, who should put into crystal clear words and articulation that what is needed of the moment. And Carlyle is trying to reassure them, if you can do this, if you can give a voice to the people, there's a whole class, governed class, a whole million of them who are willing to listen to you. So he's kind of saying, where was this? Yeah, don't be a son of Knox, don't be a blind cowardice. There are people that are looking to be led by you. And truly, this first practical form of the Sphinx question, inarticulately and so audibly put there, is one of the most impressive ever asked in the world. Behold us here, so many thousands, millions, and increasing at the rate of 50 every hour. We are right willing and able to work, and on the planet Earth is plenty of work and wages for 1,000,000 times as many. We ask, if you mean to lead us towards work, to try to lead us by ways new, never yet heard of till this new unheard of time, or if you declare that you cannot lead us and expect that we are to remain quietly unled, in a composed manner, perish of starvation, what is it you expect of us? What is it you mean to do with us? This question, I say, has been put in the hearing of all Britain, and will again be put, and ever again, till some answer be given it. So here Carlyle expands upon what this crowd did in the Manchester insurrection. They're saying, we are here, we mean to do work, we can work, and we know that out there in the world there is work, but we're not seeing it, and our numbers are increasing, we are unled. The governing class, as Carlyle observes, are cowards, they have retreated, there's no leadership. So the crowd is saying our numbers are increasing, there's not enough work. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to just perish? Or are you going to think of things, of ways never heard of? Because the times, this is like the middle of the Industrial Revolution. So just like today we think of the times quite accelerating with the internet, with artificial intelligence, and before that with transistors. I mean, for us, the 20th and 21st centuries feel very fast, and for them too. We, at least here in our modern day, we have the centuries at this point of an industrial revolution to look back on. And I feel like we have, at least psychologically, adapted to the change of the pace. But I think one must imagine in Carlyle's time, the feudal orders were disintegrating, and this whole industrial revolution, it must have felt very not only quick, but also fearful. So Carlyle is saying that the people are looking for an answer. They have put the question. They have been very judicious in the way they put the question. They didn't do any violence. They merely made their case known, and then they dissolved. And now Carlyle is saying this question has been put to the leaders or wannabe leaders, to-be leaders in Britain, and it will be put again and again until someone answers it. Unhappier workers, unhappier idlers, unhappy men and women of this actual England, we are yet very far from an answer, and there will be no existence for us without finding one. A fair day's wages for a fair day's work. It is as just a demand as governed men ever made of governing. It is the everlasting right of man, indisputable as gospels, as arithmetical multiplication tables. It must and will have itself fulfilled. And yet, in these times of ours, with what enormous difficulty, next door to impossibility. For the times are really strange, of a complexity intricate with all the new width of the ever-widening world, times here of half-frantic velocity of impetus, times here of half-frantic velocity of impetus, there of the deadest-looking stillness and paralysis, times definable as showing two qualities, dilettantism and mammonism, most intricate and obstructed times. Nay, if there were not a heaven's radiance of justice, prophetic, clearly of heaven, discernible behind all these confused worldwide entanglements of landlord interests, manufacturing interests, Tory Whig interests, and who knows what other interests, expediencies, vested interests, established possessions, inveterate dilettantisms, Midas-eared mammonisms, it would seem to every one a flat impossibility which all wise men might as well at once abandon. If you do not know eternal justice from momentary expediency, and understand in your hearts of hearts, how justice, radiant, beneficent, as the all-victorious light element, is also in essence, if need be, an all-victorious fire element, and melts all manner of vested interests and the hardest iron cannon, as if they were soft wax, and does ever in the long run rule and reign, and allows nothing else to the rule and reign, you also would talk of impossibility. But it is only difficulty. It is not impossible. Possible, it is with whatever difficulty very clearly inevitable. So Carlyle is basically saying this is a strange time. There are a lot of interests, and if you did not really believe in eternal justice, if you did not truly know it, and if you didn't truly believe and know that the eternal justice, the light element, God, can melt away all of these entrenched interests and the cowardliness and the kind of lack of leadership, the vested interests that are causing these structural problems. If you didn't know that God, light element, justice, can, when needed, become a fire element and kind of melt all of these problems away, if you didn't know this, you too would talk of an impossibility. But he's saying it's only difficult, it is not impossible, because we know that justice will prevail in the end. That does ever, in the long run, rule and reign. So justice, in the long run, will rule and reign again. Talking a little bit about the the difficult times. He's basically painting for us a picture of contradictions and a lack of seriousness. So he's saying the times are strange. There's a lot of intricacy, ever widening world. So the kind of what for us now are somewhat primitive forms of globalism have begun. He's saying there's on one side a frantic velocity, like things are happening super fast, but on the other side there's also enormous stillness and paralysis and an inability to move despite movement being necessary. He's saying that it's showing two qualities, dilettantism and mammonism. Dilettantism refers to a person who cultivates an area of interest such as the arts without real commitment or knowledge. So this is someone who kind of is like half in, half out. They're not able to seriously commit and acquire the difficult knowledge and crafts that their chosen profession requires. And also of mammonism, which means wealth regarded as an evil influence or false object of worship or devotion. It was taken by medieval writers as the name of the devil of covetousness and revived in this sense by Milton. So there's also so some people are half in, half out, and there are others that are pursuing money at the expense of everything else. So they're kind of blinded, and their morality is blinded by their pursuit of money. It is a strange, strange time. And there are all these different interests. There are landlords, there's the political interests, there's various manufacturing, etc. There are tons and tons of these entrenched interests and these unserious, uncommitted, or blinded ideologies that are in people's minds, in the governing class. And therefore, Carlyle is saying, if you didn't really believe that God could deal with all of this, you might also think that our situation is just impossible. But he's saying it's only difficult, not impossible. Fair day's wages for a fair day's work, exclaims a sarcastic man. Alas, in what corner of this planet, since Adam first awoke on it, was that ever realized? The day's wages of Milton's day's work, named Paradise Lost in Milton's works, were £10 paid by installments and a rather close escape from death on the gallows. Consider that it is no rhetorical flourish, it is an authentic, altogether quiet fact, emblematic, quietly documentary of a whole world of such ever since human history began. So, he is trying to, as we've seen in the beginning, where Carlyle was giving us the opinion of the continental newspaperman, Carlyle is sort of in a dialogue with his opponents. He's trying to play the devil's advocate. He has a clear position, as we'll see, and we have seen so far. But he's trying to say, he's trying to steel man, and he's trying to properly convey the opposing viewpoints so that he can kind of address them properly. So one of these viewpoints is, the Manchester Insurrection people, they want fair wages. They think they're doing too much work. They're not getting enough money. And some might say, when has anyone ever gotten enough money for what they did? And they're saying in John Milton's day, so John Milton is another famous writer. He wrote in the 1600s, as I had looked it up. We don't need to look it up again. Very famous. One of the Paradise Lost is considered to be a canon of English prose or poetry. I'm not sure which. Haven't read it yet. But basically, John Milton was writing in the 1600s, and Carlyle is writing in the 1800s. So he's talking, he's referencing this argument that he's going to argue against. But the argument says, 200 years ago in John Milton's time, a fair day's work would be rewarded with £10 paid in installments, so not even paid all at once, and the fact that you weren't killed. That's all you could hope for a day's work 200 years ago. So the opposing argument might just say, where do these Manchester insurrectors come off thinking that they can just demand more? When has that ever happened? When has that ever happened since human history began? Says the opposing view. Oliver Cromwell quitted his farming, undertook a Hercules labor and lifelong wrestle with that Lernean hydrocoil wide as England, hissing heaven high through its 1,000-crowned, coronated, shovel-hatted quack hats, and he did wrestle with it, the truest and terriblest wrestle I have heard of, and he wrestled it and mowed and cut it down a good many stages, so that its hissing is ever since pitiful in comparison, and one can walk abroad in comparative peace from it, and his wages, as I understand, were burial under the gallows tree near Tyburn Turnpike, with his head on the gable of Westminster Hall, and 2 centuries now of mixed cursing and ridicule from all manner of men. His dust lies under the Edgware Road near Tyburn Turnpike at this hour, and his memory is— nay, what matters what his memory is? His memory at bottom is or yet shall be as that of a god, a terror and horror to all quacks and cowards and insincere persons, an everlasting encouragement, new memento, battle word, and pledge of victory to all the brave. It is the natural course and history of the godlike in every place and every time. What god ever carried with it the £10 franchisers in open vestry, or with any Sanhedrin of considerable standing? When was a god found agreeable to everybody? The regular way is to hang, kill, crucify your gods, and execrate and trample them under your stupid hoofs for a century or two, till you discover that they are gods, and then take to braying over them still in very long-eared manner. So speaks the sarcastic man in his wild way, very mournful truth. So Carlyle is continuing the opinion of the sarcastic man, which the kind of opposing view, but the opposing view, unfortunately, is about to say some very mournful truths, and these mournful truths are: Oliver Cromwell, he was some sort of a leader of England, and Oliver Cromwell is a leader who wrestled with these entrenched interests, says the opposing view. And what did he get for it? He was killed. He was buried. And he was, not only was he killed and buried, but it's going to be said somewhere. His wages are 2 centuries now of mixed cursing and ridicule from all manner of men. So not only was he killed for his struggle against these entrenched interests, against the hydrocoil that he compares this to. So the Lernean hydrocoil refers to, I think it's somewhere here, to the many-headed serpent from Greek myth that Hercules had to slay. Each time he cut off a head, 2 more grew back. So Oliver Cromwell is a man, a leader that wanted and did wrestle with all these interests, with all the crowned, coronated, shovel-hatted quackheads, as he calls them, and he was killed for it. But he mowed and cut it down to a good many stages. So he was successful in that struggle, but eventually he was killed, and he was ridiculed for 2 centuries. And the memory his memory, of Oliver Cromwell's memory, is at bottom that of a god. And how do we treat gods? Well, we treat them, as this opponent says, very truthfully. The regular way is to hang, kill, crucify your gods, and execrate, which means feel or express great loathing for. So basically, hate them, mock them, trample them for a century or two until you discover that they were the good guys, and then braying over them. This is the sound that donkeys make, and that's why Carlyle still references long-eared. So, 2 centuries later, after everything is said and done, and you did not support them at the time, you will become their fans again. But he's saying, too little, too late for the leader. And another thing that Carlyle shows is that this is the story of a great leader, a heroic man, a godlike person in every place and every time. And these references are 10-pound franchisers, but they're basically different, like vested interests, but I thought it might be interesting to show them. Carlyle's 10-pound franchisers refers to the middle-class Englishmen who, after the 1832 Reform Act, gained the right to vote by owning or renting property worth £10. The open vestry is a local parish meeting run by property holders, and Sanhedrin, from the Jewish High Council in the Bible, is used ironically for any self-important governing assembly. So, Carlyle is saying that no man, no leader, no godlike man is ever going to be agreeable to everybody, every vested interest, every kind of group out there. They will never be able to ally with the various heads of the Hydra. And unfortunately, the people will not be on their side as well. Day's wages for a day's work, continues he, the sarcastic man. The progress of human society consists even in this same, the better and better apportioning of wages to work. Give me this, you have given me all. Pay to every man accurately what he has worked for, what he has earned and done and deserved. To this man broad lands and honors, to that man high gibbets and treadmills. What more have I to ask? Heaven's kingdom, which we daily pray for, has come. God's will is done on earth even as it is in heaven. This is the radiance of celestial justice in the light or in the fire, of which all impediments, vested interests, and iron cannon are more and more melting like wax and disappearing from the pathways of men. A thing ever struggling forward, irrepressible, advancing inevitable, perfecting itself all days more and more, never to be perfect till that general doomsday, the ultimate consummation, and last of earthly days. So here Carlyle is continuing to say the sarcastic man's argument, which another part of his argument. So the sarcastic man, the man that Carlyle is going to argue against in a while, has made a couple of arguments so far. So he has said fair day's wages for a fair day's work is kind of too much to ask. 200 years ago, you were really getting a lot less than what you're getting now. So this is not a reasonable ask. Also, what kind of a leader do you expect to emerge here? Because Oliver Cromwell was that kind of a leader 200 years ago, and he got crucified for it. So, it's not reasonable to really expect this. And now we have another argument, which is that, by the way, like the apportioning the wages to work, so adjusting how, redistributing basically the wealth of the society to the people that work is a continuous effort. And it's kind of like you're kind of asking for perfection here. If you want a perfect match between a day's wages and a day's work, that is literally heaven's kingdom. That is literally what we pray for every day. You kind of want heaven on earth if you're demanding that. If you want that, like a man who is deserving lands and honors gets them, and that other man who doesn't deserve them doesn't get them. Like you're kind of asking for perfection. Whereas society, others argue, the sarcastic man argues, is it's continually evolving. We'll get there, but it's a struggle, ever perfecting itself. And don't ask society to be so perfect until the last day, until Judgment Day. So now Carlyle is going to argue against that. True, as to perfection and so forth, answer we, and again we see the we see how Carlyle identifies with the Manchester insurrectionists. In fact, thinking a little bit about it, he is trying to be, despite the fact that he's not a political leader, he is trying to be the voice of the people, of the inarticulate masses, that he really wanted somebody else, somebody in the governing class, to be able to speak for. But nobody has come forward, so now Carlyle is doing it. True. As to perfection and so forth, answer we, true enough. And yet, withal, we have to remark, withal means nevertheless, and yet nevertheless we have to remark that imperfect human society holds itself together and finds place under the sun in virtue simply of some approximation to perfection being actually made and put in practice. So, we may not be perfect, but we're trying to approximate it. Human society is trying to approximate it. We remark further that there are supportable approximations and then likewise insupportable. With some, almost with any, supportable approximation, men are apt, perhaps too apt, to rest indolently patient and say, it will do. Thus these poor Manchester manual workers mean only by day's wages for a day's work certain coins of money adequate to keep them living, in return for their work, such modicum of food, clothes, and fuel as will enable them to continue their work itself. They as yet clamor for no more. The rest, still inarticulate, cannot yet shape itself into a demand at all, and only lies in them as a dumb wish, perhaps only still more inarticulate as a dumb, altogether unconscious want. This is the supportable approximation they would rest patient with, that by their work they might be kept alive to work more. This once grown unattainable, I think your approximation may consider itself to have reached the insupportable stage, and may prepare with whatever difficulty, reluctance, and astonishment for one of two things, for changing or perishing. With the millions no longer able to live, how can the units keep living? It is too clear the nation itself is on the way to suicidal death. So Carlyle argues against this argument of the sarcastic man that the crowds are demanding some kind of utopia, by saying, we're not after utopia. He's saying we do recognize that human societies, so on earth, we're not going to get heaven on earth. We're going to get some sort of an approximation of our demand or desire towards a virtuous society. And some of these approximations are supportable and some of them are insupportable. In fact, Carlyle says that, if any kind of if the situation was tenable, if this was a supportable approximation of the way things are supposed to be, of justice, then most men are just lazy. They say it will do. They won't really ask for more. So these but basically Carlyle's arguing we've kind of reached an insupportable stage. That things must either change, or the system as it stands now, it must change or perish, because it has become insupportable. And the reason it has become insupportable is that the people just want enough money so that they have enough food and clothes and fuel so that they can just continue working. Like, they're not asking for big luxuries here. Carlyle is saying, this is the supportable approximation. If they just had this stuff, they would rest patient with it. And the food and the clothes and fuel, also Carlyle is saying, this is like as much as they can articulate. So he's still saying the needs of the masses, they're not so verbalized yet. Only some of it is verbalized. The rest just have like a general wish. They're inarticulate, and they have an unconscious want for things to change. And Carlyle says all of this, the unconscious want is just that they are kept alive so that they can keep working more. And this is very reasonable, but once that is unattainable for the masses, your system is going to be unsustainable. And it must, regardless of the difficulty, regardless of your reluctance of all the interests or their surprise, things must either change or the system will perish. And he's saying it's too clear the nation itself is on the way to suicidal death. If no action is taken, the system will perish, Carlyle says. Shall we say then the world has retrograded in its talent of apportioning wages to work in late days? The world had always a talent of that sort, better or worse. Time was when the mere hand worker needed not announce his claim to the world by Manchester insurrections. The world, with its wealth of nations, supply and demand and such like, has of late days been terribly inattentive to that question of work and wages. We will not say the poor world has retrograded even here. We will say rather the world has been rushing on with such fiery animation to get work and ever more work done, it has had no time to think of dividing the wages, and has merely left them to be scrambled for by the law of the stronger, law of supply and demand, or law of laissez-faire, and other idle laws and unlaws, saying, in its dire haste to get work done, that this is well enough. And now the world will have to pause a little and take up that other side of the problem, and in right earnest strive for some solution of that, for it has become pressing. What is the use of your spun shirts? They hang there by the million, unsaleable, and here, by the million, are diligent bare backs that can get no hold of them. Shirts are useful for covering human backs, useless otherwise, and an unbearable mockery otherwise. You have fallen terribly behind with that side of the problem. Manchester insurrections, French revolutions, and thousandfold phenomena, great and small, announce loudly that you must bring it forward a little again. Never till now in the history of an earth which to this hour nowhere refuses to grow corn if you will plow it, to yield shirts if you will spin and weave it, did the mere manual two-handed worker, however it might fare with the other workers, cry in vain for such wages as he means by fair wages, namely food and warmth. The godlike could not and cannot be paid, but the earthly always could. So, let me see. Carlyle is saying quite a few things here. So, basically, one of the things he's saying is we're not... He's arguing the justice of his case. So let's take a little bit of a look. He's saying, giving the appropriate wages to work done, we can say that the world has lost sight of retrograded in its ability to do so. I mean, compensating people for the work that they do, this is an eternal human problem. It's always with us. But the ability of the world to do it has retrograded, has degraded. He's saying, because he's saying that time was, so in the past, a mere hand worker, a man who works with his two hands, did not need to do a whole insurrection to demand this claim, to ask for fair wages. And a little bit later, he's going to say, like, this fair wages that we're talking about here, they are, by what he means by fair wages are food and warmth. Like, these are not luxuries. This is not something that is not due the person. Carlyle is saying, we are reasonable, and we will not say, so there's that we again. And Carlyle is again putting himself as a spokesperson for the crowds that are demanding these fair wages, basically food and warmth. He's saying, we're not going to blame you. We're not going to say that you regressed. We're just going to say, okay, the times are interesting and volatile. And so you, the governing classes, you were in this fiery animation to get more and more work done. And unfortunately had no time to think about how to compensate people for all the work that is to be done. And so you kind of left them to themselves, either by sorting it out with the law of the stronger, or by mindless, mechanistic, procedural laws of the economy, supply, demand, laissez-faire. So because you were very hasteful to get work done. So Carlyle is saying, well, now you have to pause a little because the situation has become pressing. And Carlyle gives the examples like, okay, you do all this work, but it's kind of a mockery when there's nobody on the other side to consume it. So you make all the shirts, and they are not sellable by the million because the people can't buy them, and they have bare backs. They have no food or clothes or warmth. Even though you're generating the warmth, it is not reaching the people that should be buying said warmth. Otherwise, it's an unbearable mockery otherwise. There's something deeply wrong when the more and more output is produced and none of it is reaching the appropriate destinations. And he's saying this insurrection, as well as many others, the revolution and the thousandfold phenomena, great and small. So the demand for an answer to the structural problems are present, and never until now did a mere two-handed worker really have to do all of this, have to demonstrate in 1,000 ways that mere food and warmth are the things that he should be asking for so loudly. Basically, Carlyle is saying, why are you not hearing the message? Something is deeply wrong here. Gurth, a mere swineherd born thrall of Cedric the Saxon, tended pigs in the wood and did get some parings of the pork. Why the four-footed worker has already got all that this two-handed one is clamoring for? How often must I remind you? There is not a horse in England able and willing to work, but has due food and lodging, and goes about sleek-coated, satisfied in heart. And you say it is impossible. Brothers, I answer, if for you it be impossible, what is to become of you? It is impossible for us to believe it to be impossible. The human brain, looking at these sleek English horses, refuses to believe in such impossibility for English men. Do you depart quickly, clear the way soon, lest worse befall. We, for our share, do purpose, with full view of the enormous difficulty, with total disbelief in the impossibility to endeavor while life is in us, and to die endeavoring, we and our sons, till we attain it or have all died and ended. So Carlyle is saying, so Goethe and Cedric of Saxon, these are characters from Sir Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe. Cedric is a proud Saxon nobleman, and Goethe is his bondsman, a swineherd bound to Cedric's estate. So Carlyle is saying, Goethe was a serf, basically, an indentured servant of this nobleman in the novel that at this time everyone must know about. And he's saying, and he got, when he tended the pigs, he got a pair of the pairings of the pork. He got a slice of his work. So Carlyle is basically saying all these millions of people in Manchester, they are demonstrating as free men for something that an indentured servant had not that long ago. Also, he's saying, it's also kind of absurd that they are protesting for food and warmth and lodging. So food and lodging, which is something that the four-footed workers, so the horses, the animals, already have. The horses in England, Carlyle is saying, are better off than the workers. And he's kind of daring the governing class. And you're saying it's impossible? It cannot be impossible. Animals cannot be at a better station than humans. This is a disbelief. We do not believe this. We do not believe in its impossibility. Again, Carlyle is very much on the side of the Manchester insurrectionists. And he's saying, we will endeavor, this situation cannot stand. We will endeavor. Our sons will endeavor. So this will be an intergenerational fight, if it must be, until we have attained it, or until the system is no more. Such a platitude of a world in which all working horses could be well fed and innumerable working men should die starved, were it not best to end it, to have done with it, and restore it once for all to the Jotuns, mud giants, frost giants, and chaotic brute gods of the beginning. For the old anarchic brute gods it may be well enough, but it is a platitude which men should be above countenancing by their presence in it. We pray you, let the word impossible disappear from your vocabulary in this matter. It is of awful omen to all of us, and to yourselves first of all. So Carlyle is saying, in a world where the animals are better off than the men, really, like, this is indefensible. We might as well burn it all down. We might as well go to the beginning, to the biblical times where chaos and all sorts of creatures and demons were roaming about, because the system is just as well under then. And then he's saying, please, men, you cannot countenance this. Please make the impossible disappear from your vocabulary and address the issues of the Manchester insurrectionists, as well as the French revolutionists and many others that are demanding the same. And he's saying, if you can't, we will all basically perish, and yourselves first of all. There's a little bit of a threat in it, because the Carlyle seems to say there's no you and us as like opposing sides in this. If our needs are not met, yours will also not be met in the long run when the system collapses.